So I've been getting a lot of questions lately about what is the difference between a joint venture and a syndication. So particularly if you're new to multifamily real estate, you probably hear some of these buzzwords flying around. And at least when I was brand new, I remember thinking, I don't know where all of this like lives. Like, where do I place these different things? So I wanted to spend a few minutes and just clear that up, so that if you've heard those words, you don't exactly understand like when do they apply, when do they not, and when should you do one versus the other. I want to clear all that up in this video. So joint venture and syndication both play a part in the role of financing a multifamily property. Now, when is one appropriate versus another, that I'm going to get to. But a joint venture is probably the fastest, easiest, simplest way to get started, find, fund, and close your first deal so you can start getting some experience. All right, syndication is also, it's a financing strategy, and I'll kind of explain like how what the whole thing is and where this fits. But it is a much more advanced financing strategy. So like within our academy, what I always tell our students is, look, syndication, save that for later. Do a few deals first as a joint venture so you can actually close and get experience. And I'll explain what I mean in just a moment. So when you're doing a joint venture, it's essentially just what it sounds like, you and one other person or a few other people getting together to do the deal. Now, within our academy, the way that we most typically see joint ventures in our community is you'll have one person who is out there like, researching markets and calling brokers and getting deal flow, underwriting deals, making offers, etc. We call that an acquisitions manager. When you're a little bit further along, in the beginning, I really want all investors to do the entire thing, start to finish, because otherwise, how do you exactly understand how to evaluate a deal if you don't understand what it's like to do the whole thing? Or how do you ever step into a role if you have a team member who is sick or whatever, if you've never done it? So I always want our students in the academy to do the entire deal start to finish for a couple of deals before specializing. But in the world of specializing, that first section would be called like an acquisitions manager. When you're doing joint venture and you're just getting started, I would refer to you as like the operator. All right, so in a joint venture, like the main person, the operator, the one who found the deal and basically is pulling everything together, that would be the primary operator. And then the partners in the deal, usually their primary role is contributing capital. Now that doesn't have to be the case always, and I'll give you an example of where that might be a little bit different, but generally speaking, that's the case. So if you have, let's say, 4 people in a deal and you have the primary operator, the one who found it, they may contribute capital and they may not contribute capital. It just depends on how things are being structured, and the other 3 people are contributing, let's say, all or most of the capital, and then taking on some small role. So there's really one person that's doing like the majority of everything, and that's what they're being compensated for, is doing everything, and everyone else who's putting in money and doing some small role, they're being compensated for their part in the deal. So where sometimes I see things a little bit different, I don't know that this happens out like in the regular world, but within the remote multifamily investing academy, everybody who comes to us is coming to learn how to invest in multifamily and how to get started. So in that environment, it's very common for someone to be willing to put capital into a deal so they can get into their first deal, but they might also want to have a more active role than what would be expected of a joint venture partner normally. And we encourage it, because if you can get in there and get real life experience on a 10 unit or 20 unit, I mean, the amount that you're going to learn is going to blow your mind. That's just the absolute reality. So sometimes within the academy, we see people who are capital partners, but they are also doing a different part of the deal, act very actively because they're trying to get experience in that particular area. All right. Okay, so that is what joint venture is. Now, syndication, and let me back up a little bit. Joint venture, the whole way it stays joint venture is as long as everybody in the deal is active in some way. There can't be anybody who's completely passive. So in a syndication, you have the active investors, and then you have the partners, the limited partners. They're completely passive. In a joint venture, you can't have anyone who's completely passive, which is why everybody needs to have some active role in the deal, even if it's a small one. Everyone needs to have voting rights, because the whole idea is that in a joint venture, everybody is responsible for creating the profit in the deal. That's like the concept behind joint venture. When you go to syndication, the syndication is governed, and the oversight is from the Securities and Exchange Commission. All right, so they are very, as you can probably imagine, they are very particular about making sure that the public is safe and is not duped or anything like that. So when you're going to do a syndication, meaning you're going to have investors in the deal who are completely passive, they don't have voting rights, they're not involved in the operations, none of that. It has to go through, it basically has to become a syndication, which means you need to have a syndication attorney or an SEC attorney. You need to have a private placement memorandum, subscription documents. You're probably dealing with multiple LLCs. So it's a very expensive process, and it is also, it's very complex. So it's not that it doesn't play a role, but when you're brand new, I mean, just to learn how to close on your first 10 unit, it feels like monumental, the learning curve. So you've done it a couple times and you're like, oh, that wasn't so hard at all, right? And now you're ready to go through the learning curve of syndication because it's a whole other world. But the whole idea with the SEC is they want to make sure that you are following like all of the rules, because they want to make sure that it's not a Ponzi scheme, that no one's being taken advantage of, that everything is documented. Anyway, so when I'm talking publicly about, you know, when you're new, forget what people say, because it's true. If you watch any of the big commercial real estate education companies that are out there, especially when they're very out there, if you go to any of their events, you're probably going to hear something very similar to what I'm about to say right now, which is, you know, what's the point of buying a 10 unit when 100 units, 10 units, it's all the same work. So why would you bother with a 10 unit? Just go for the 100 unit. And of course you're going to say, oh, there's no way I have the down payment and all the costs for a 100 unit building, right? That's millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars. And to what they would reply, don't worry about it. You don't need to have the money. You're just going to syndicate. So it's like they hit an easy button. Ooh, easy. You just syndicate. No big deal. First of all, when you're syndicating a deal, you are literally getting people who are going to put money in your deal. They are going to completely have to rely on you as the operator, your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom, your ability to creatively think through challenges and problems, your resilience. Like, they literally are putting all of their faith in your ability to execute your business plan on this 100 unit property. And you've never closed even on a 10 unit. So I would say, how easy is it really going to be to raise capital for a 100 unit deal from investors when they have no voting rights, they're completely passive, and you have no experience, right? So it's one of the biggest, I don't even know what to call it, lies. It's a huge lie that's out there. So when you hear someone saying, yeah, it's fine, just do 100 units, you get this huge acquisition fee. I'm not saying that they're lying straight to your face. That's for you to decide. But what I am saying is, wow, that sure does leave out a lot of the details. So if you were to go get a 100 unit deal and you're brand new, first of all, you know, it's going to be almost impossible to get investors, because they'll be like, I don't think so. There's no way, right? You don't have any experience yet. But the other big block is going to be the banks, right? Lenders. If you think about a real estate deal, the biggest investor in a deal is the lender. In commercial multifamily, it's very common to be anywhere between 60 and 72% loan to value, which means the bank is putting up the largest amount of money. So as much as like getting investors is going to be a challenge, well, guess how it's going to be for the one putting up multi-millions of dollars, right? Not someone who's just putting up $50,000 or $100,000. Not that that's a small amount, but that's like what an individual would do. Well, the lending institution is putting up millions and millions of dollars. So if you think about it from their standpoint, how likely do you think it's going to be that they're going to say, oh, you have no experience? Sure, here's a $8 million loan. Here's a $15 million loan. Yeah, it doesn't happen. They don't do that. Banks are extremely risk averse. They're probably one of the most conservative businesses out there, and for good reason. Their job is to make sure that their investment is protected. All right, so what ends up happening when students go through that process and they drink the Kool-Aid about how easy it is, you can syndicate, then they go to get the loan, and the lender's like, you're gonna need a sponsor, right? And then they go to whoever the guru was that they paid their $40,000 to, and they say, oh, no problem, we'll be the sponsor, or for 50% of your deal. So it's like this terrible loop, and it's literally one of the things that drove me and Jen to start. It was Warriors of Wealth when we started. We rebranded to Remote Multifamily Investing Academy, but we're still the Warriors of Wealth. Is we wanted to disrupt the commercial education industry, because what is spouted out there to get you to hand over your big bucks is it's false. It's like baby partial truths wrapped into this beautiful big story about all the money you can make, except you can't go from 0 to 100 units. The lenders don't do it. Your investors won't do it. Anyway, so the difference between a joint venture and syndication, other than the technical difference of joint venture having active investors, syndication having passive investors, where joint venture is more appropriate or makes more sense. So let's say you have a ton of experience and you're just deciding, oh, on this deal, do I want to go joint venture or do I want to go syndication? So let's say it has nothing to do with your experience. You've already got experience. The banks will lend to you, blah, blah, blah. What then drives joint venture or syndication? In that case, it really comes down to the number of people on the deal need to make sense. So in a joint venture, because everybody is supposed to have some kind of active role, in theory, it's like, well, all of these people are necessary to make the deal happen. And that can be a little like open to interpretation. But if you think about it, if someone's buying a 15 or a 20 unit, property, and they have 20 investors in the deal and trying to call it a joint venture, does it really require 20 people to manage the asset of a 20 unit? Plus, of course, you're already going to have a third party property manager, right? And of course not. So the SEC would look at that and say, there's no way we buy that you have 20 active investors on this 20 unit deal. So effectively, you're saying it's a joint venture, but it really is a syndication because there's no way you don't have completely passive investors in there. So the rule of thumb, because there's no exact rule, the SEC hasn't issued a guideline saying a joint venture can have up to X number of people. I mean, literally, it wouldn't make any sense, but technically it could be you have two partners in a deal and one of them is completely passive, like 100% passive, no voting rights, has nothing to do with the deal, just put money in and is, expecting return. Even that would technically be a syndication, all right? Which is why everybody needs to have an active role. Now, if someone had a ton of experience, right? The gist of it is, talking to multiple different attorneys over the years, is 5 partners seems to be the generally accepted number in a joint venture, right? But still everyone needs to be active. So if you think of there's a 15 or 20 unit, building and you have 20 people, that's a no-go. Have 5 people, you just need to make sure everybody has a documented role in the deal. But that's usually where it cuts off. So if you think about it, you're not limited by the dollar amount of the deal. So usually what will drive whether it's going to be a joint venture or a syndication is the amount of money that has to be raised for the deal. So things like the down payment, the closing costs, the financing costs, the reserves, if there's rehab, like all of that money. That's all the money that has to be raised. If you can raise that with a handful of people, regardless of the amount, if it's $100,000 you're raising or if it's $5 million you're raising, if you're raising $5 million and you're putting in 0 and you have 4 like really rich friends that are each putting in 1.25 million, and so there's 5 people total, that could technically still be, and everyone's active, that technically still could be, it's a joint venture, right? But even a deal that has only, $100,000 raised, but has non-active people, that would technically be a syndication. But 5 in general is the kind of accepted rule of thumb. I have seen people do deals where they had 7 people in it in order to make it happen. It just gets trickier if it was ever questioned, and you just truly have to make sure that everybody's involved. The other side of it, just from a management standpoint, is it becomes more challenging to manage 7 partners and to get buy-off from 7 partners. So there are a number of different things, but what we've seen generally in the academy is usually when there are deals where the raise is up to, 400,000, sometimes 500,000 or 600,000, they can, depending on how much money people are bringing into the deal, those can oftentimes be done as a joint venture. But as soon as you hit to the point where you cannot raise the capital from just a few active partners, that's when you're shifting into syndication. So because joint venture is so much simpler, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is infinitely simpler compared to syndication, that is where you want to start if you want to actually start. And over and over and over we've been running our academy for 6 years, and over all of the years, so many people end up coming to us after they've been in some other education program for 2, sometimes longer, 2 years, 3 years. They still don't have a deal. And it's because what they were focusing on was exactly what that education company told them to focus on, which is syndication, which is nearly impossible to take across the finish line when you're brand new and you don't even know how to underwrite yet, right? You're just really green. but once you've done a couple of small deals, so we talk about it and we call it the proven path of ascension. And in our Multifamily Freedom Summit, when we do our 3-day, virtual training that's live, that's one of the sections we talk about. And here's the gist of it: is there's a stair-step ascension to doing this, like building and scaling in multifamily, that we have seen succeed over and over and over and over. And it's not just me and Jen. It's not our deals. Like, it's not, we learn so much more than even from our own deals, because we have an entire academy of investors. Some of them have been with us for 5 years, and many of them have turned out to be, coaches in our academy in specific areas. But we see so many deals, not just our own. And that's what we've seen over and over and over. So if you think of it, like, some people will start with, a couple of duplexes, which is fine. You don't have to start with 2 to 4 unit properties or residential. We do teach it. We have a whole program, for it. When interest rates went high, went crazy, we kind of shelved it for a while because the numbers didn't really make sense at that point. But once interest rates started coming back down, there's more people interested in doing that. So some people will choose to start with that because that's just what their comfort zone is. Cool, it's fine. Everybody's going to ultimately end up in the same place, which is buying apartment buildings anyway. But anyway, so if you want to start with 2 to 4 units, do a deal or two and just kind of get your feet wet there, that's cool. If you don't, that's also fine. But what I suggest you start with is something in the, 5 to 10 units or 5 to 15 units range. Something that is small enough where you could fund it with a couple of other people and you can get the experience. And trust me when I say you're going to want that experience from deals number 1 to ideally 3 before you go into syndication, because no matter how much you learn, every deal provides some opportunity to learn something that you've never even heard of, like some weird random thing, just on top of the regular learning curve. And every deal that you do, you learn more and more and more. So your knowledge stacks, your wisdom stacks. And so by the time you're on deal number 4, and maybe you started with a 10 unit, then you did a 20, then a 30, and now you're doing a 50 or 60 unit, and that's a syndication. But that syndicated deal you're doing, you're bringing with you those 3 other deals worth of wisdom, experience, and track record, frankly. And during that time, if you think about it, during that time you're doing those first few deals that are the smaller deals, you have people, if you're smart about social media and you're, making it known what you're doing, it's going to be a lot easier when you get into syndication, because people will realize that you've been doing this for a while, that you've actually been actively investing in real estate. So getting investors for your syndicated deals, you start getting to the bigger ones, becomes so much easier. And when people do syndication too early, because they haven't made the realization yet about the capital raising part of it, it's stressful when you're new and you don't have a track record and people won't invest with you. But when they do a syndication too soon, in my opinion, that's one of the biggest things they see right away was, oh my gosh, it's really hard to raise the capital. And that's not because raising capital is hard. Raising capital is actually not hard, it's super fun. But when you don't have a track record, it's just hard because people aren't investing because you don't have a track record. So if you can get a few that you can do with a handful of people first, get your experience, your entire journey is so much different. It's so much easier, and you're going to be able to get, deal 1, 2, 3, and then you just start, it's like a hockey stick. You just start taking off, you can do bigger and bigger deals, and that is the proven path of ascension. That is why we have so many success stories in the academy. And most of the deals that are done in the academy, especially when they're joint ventures, are all done with people all within the academy. Like, everyone just partners with each other, right? It's this giant incestuous relationship of everybody inside the academy. But the reality is everybody there has the same mindset. They all have been trained by me. So they know the exact process. Nobody's skipping any steps. Everyone knows exactly what to do because they've had the same training. So every once in a while, when someone brings in a joint venture partner from the outside, it can get a little bit tricky because that person's like, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? And they're not educated about the right way to do things. And so anyway, so sometimes our students find it challenging to partner with people who are not in the academy because they just don't have the same background. They don't have the same coaching and the knowledge and the training that the students in the academy have. But a lot of times the deals done in the academy almost always have multiple people from within the academy. So all of them, so let's say there's a deal where you have 4 people total. Maybe there's 1 main operator and 3 people who brought in money and were doing some small role. All 4 of those people, let's say it's a 15 unit, all 4 of those people get to say when they're talking to lenders and brokers, anyone else, that they have a 15 unit property, right? And that's one of the incentives for people to get into a deal by contributing capital and take on an active role to start learning, is it speeds up their journey really fast, because in talking to brokers don't want to send someone deals that doesn't have any experience, right? And it's not because it has more to do with they're afraid they can't close. because if you think about it, brokers only get paid if you actually close. So if you're inexperienced and they can tell you're inexperienced, you've never closed a deal, they're hesitant about spending time with you because they're afraid you're not actually going to take it across the finish line, and they're going to have wasted time and not get paid. Whereas you can talk to them and say, oh yeah, on my 15 unit, blah, 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 blah. So if you think about it from that standpoint, like everything speeds up. That first deal is so important. Like if you can just get that first one done and across the finish line, just a small joint venture deal, you learn a crazy amount. Like your knowledge is sky high after doing even your first deal. And then your second and third, you learn even more and more. And sometimes you're learning things in deals 2 and 3 that happened in deal 1, but you didn't, there's so much going on that you didn't exactly know what you learned until it comes up again. Anyway, but those are the main differences between joint venture and syndication. And if you know someone who is looking into multifamily, please, and they're just getting started, and it's possible they're going to hear that BS story about, yeah, just start with 100 units, by some guru. Please pass this along to them, because we already know there's a proven way to do this. We have almost 200 people in our academy that have been investing in real estate, continue to invest in real estate, and it's because they're following the path that we've laid out before them. So when we say we want to disrupt the commercial real estate education industry, that is exactly what we've done, and that's what we're going to continue to do, because in my opinion, the more people there are that can take control of their own wealth and creating passive income and creating their own retirement instead of relying on the government or their employer or anything else, then the more empowered people are, and then the happier they are, the more confident they are, which kind of raises the whole vibe. Now we're sounding really woo-woo, but it's true. And then also, our goal with our, Warriors of Wealth 300, our students who are with us now for life, they're in for 3 years, and now we've invited them to be with us for life. Our whole goal with that is for everyone to make as much money as possible. And the people that come to us are not coming to us because they want to make as much money as possible to buy a bunch of Lamborghinis and have beer in the fridge, right? Or wine or whatever people would drink, right? There's nothing wrong with having nice things, 100%. That is not what I'm saying at all. But there's a different level of motivation. What we found from the people who end up coming to us and are attracted to us and is that I want to be more in the world. I want to contribute more. I want to make a difference. I want my life to matter. And I want to do something good. So what we say is, the more money you have, the more good you can do. It's just an absolute reality. And sometimes it's important to know that, especially if you grew up with, with parents and they have, between parents and religion and stuff, sometimes we get a lot of feedback about money and that, the love of money is evil and stuff like that. And I grew up, in church and stuff. So I heard all of it, as well, but there's also a context that you have to put to things. If your love of money is just a love of money and for that sake, then I don't know if that's evil, but certainly your life isn't going to be super meaningful. But if you're making a lot of money so that you can enjoy the things that are important to you, whatever that is, if that's buying a Lamborghini, then all right. And if that is, being able to take your family on an amazing vacation once a year, or being able to have time freedom or location freedom, like just literally whatever it is. So as you're building your wealth, so that you can go do whatever is important to you. Jen has just this super massive heart for specifically single moms and kids who are homeless, because she had a single mom and she also was homeless as a child at one point. And so that is a huge motivation for her. And I grew up with a single mother, but I had both parents in the picture, and I was never starving. So that doesn't speak to me in that same way. But there are other things that are important to me that I really want to be able to support. And the more money we make, the more we have options to do the things that are important to us. For right now, I've got 4 kids, 4 teenagers, and wow, just the shoes bill alone, it's absurd. That's all I'm saying. It's absurd, right? But, and if we hadn't done this, had not built our wealth, we wouldn't have the ability to, provide our kids the kind of life that we wanted to be able to provide them. Finding that balance, of course, of not giving them everything, because I don't want them to be a bunch of moochers in the world. They need to go make their own impact, but also not having them want for basics. Where both Jen and I know what it's like to want for basics. And we just wanted to have a different life for them. And we've been able to do that. Anyway, so having money is great. Not because having is great, because you can do what is important to you. anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you know someone who would benefit from kind of just learning about multifamily and learning this kind of this way of life, then please send them our way. And if you haven't been to one of our master classes yet or one of our summits, you'd like to join us and learn more about multifamily real estate, we would love to see you. And there's some information down in the description that you can use to reach out and come to one of our classes. So anyway, have an amazing, amazing rest of the week, month, year, whenever you're watching this. And I hope we get to see you in our swirl at some point. Have a good one.